A very good morning to one and all of you. Good morning. Can we have some feedback? Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you. Good morning, Dr. Muscati. Thank you, Dr. Swapna. It's a pleasure to be here and to talk on something I thought I was in the microbiology session, talking on ocular surface squamous neoplasia, like a space occupying lesion. But yes, it is indeed a space occupying lesion of the ocular surface. So, when you talk about ocular surface tumors, the three main categories that we think of are pigmented lesions, lymphoproliferative conditions, and the most common ocular surface tumor, which is ocular surface squamous neoplasia. And that is what I'm going to be talking about. So, I thought I will begin with a case presentation. Which actually involves all aspects of management. And this was a patient that I had the opportunity of seeing, I think, in October 2022, when he presented with this kind of a picture, an annular lesion. You can see it all around the limbus with an extension beyond into the bulbar surface with an epithelial defect, and there is imaging evidence of the fact that we are dealing with an epithelial lesion. This was a patient who had already been diagnosed to have ocular surface squamous neoplasia, had been on 7 to 8 cycles of mitomycin C, was on interferon topically for more than 6 months, and this was how he presented when I saw him. So, what were the options that we had in front of us? He was someone who had already undergone extensive topical chemotherapy, had an epithelial defect, so continuing topical chemotherapy was probably not the best option that we had in hand. Surgical excision, yes, this was an annular lesion that we were dealing with, an extensive lesion. And if you would go in and do a surgery, there was a very high risk of creating surgically induced limbal stem cell deficiency. But there weren't too many options, and this was a patient that I went ahead and did a surgical excision for, which basically also highlights the principles of surgical excision of OSSN, where you have a wide margin excision of close to 4 millimeters. This is an alcohol epithelectomy that is being performed, and then an excision that basically ensures that using the no touch technique, you excise the entire lesion. In a dry field, you normally don't want to irrigate the field with saline when you're excising the lesion, so that you don't really end up causing seeding of the tumor cells. There's always a need to excise the lesion at the limbus, because that's usually the point of origin where the tumor will be firmly adherent to the underlying tissue. And once you have the entire lesion out, of course, you can resort to irrigation after that. You do a change of tray, you do a change of gloves, everything is changed once the lesion is out, and then you do a double freeze thaw cryotherapy to the edge of the conjunctiva. Now, and then the bare area is covered with amniotic membrane and glued to the surface. The question here was, is this enough in this particular situation? Because we were anticipating that we would be creating limbal stem cell deficiency in this situation, which is where what we did was we went ahead and did one extra additional step. That is, we went ahead and performed the alloslet, a primary alloslet along with excision of the tumor, which is something that we did publish about. So this is how the patient looks post-operatively after excising the lesion, which on histopathology did reveal evidence of microinvasive squamous cell carcinoma. There was early complete epithelialization of the surface with no evidence of recurrence at 6 months following the procedure. So that's the pre-op, and this is the post-op at 6 months. You can still see the alloslet bits, but they usually tend to fade over a period of time. Moved to 2 years later, October 2024, at Code Eye Care. This patient still looked relatively good. He underwent a cataract surgery in between because it was a year following the excision of the lesion, and still looked pretty recurrence free. But when we saw him in February 2025, there was an area that looked suspicious here. We initially thought it was just inflammatory and saw whether he responded to topical steroids, which it did not. And on doing a biopsy, there was evidence of conjunctival intraepithelial neoplasia localized to that particular area, which is why we now decided to go ahead with 2 cycles of 5-fluorouracil, 1 week on, 3 weeks off. And this is last week on the 30th of April 2025, where there is complete healing and resolution of the lesion that we noticed in February this year. So this was one case that actually showed you the entire spectrum of topical as well as surgical therapy that sometimes these patients require, which brings me to the aspect as far as management of OSSN is concerned related to appropriate decision making, understanding the principles of therapy, the nuances of surgery that I did touch upon, which is still considered as gold standard. But of course, with the advent of topical therapy, one needs to clearly be in sync with what the pros and cons, what the indications and contraindications for topical therapy are. The pros being that it treats the entire ocular surface with reduced risk of LSCD. It is well tolerated. The risk of recurrence is less compared to white surgical excision alone. But the cons are a longer time for resolution, compliance on the part of the patient, refrigeration that is required especially for interferon and mitomycin C, the relatively lack of availability of interferon as of today as I stand here and speak to you. The cost is not a very big issue in India. It's an off-label use for the treatment of OSSN. The side effects of mitomycin C, especially related to toxicity. But the biggest issue with topical therapy is that you do not have a histopathological diagnosis that you can get in a surgical treatment, and therefore you do not have a specific diagnosis, and it primarily treats the intraepithelial neoplasia component and not the squamous cell carcinoma component. We have 3 choices: mitomycin C, 5-FU and interferon alpha. And this is a table that captures the parameters related to each one of these medications. You can choose any of these topical therapies as your first line of management, but you just need to make sure that you stick to that particular drug of choice as your first choice in most cases and switch over only if and when required. So when is the end point of topical therapy? Can you really give 7 to 8 cycles of mitomycin C and 6 months of interferon like we saw in the first patient? There should be somewhere where you need to take a decision as to whether you need to stop or move to something else. So you should see a response in 6 to 8 weeks, and if there is no response at all at 2 months, then change the drug or consider surgery. And what is clinical resolution? You should have no rose Bengal staining. You should have no clinically evident tumor on the slit lamp. There should be normal conjunctival architecture. But can you stop topical therapy at that point in time? You cannot, because you may still have microscopic cells, and therefore when you see clinical resolution, if you're treating with interferon, you need to continue it for another 6 weeks. With 5-FU, it's usually another 1 or 2 cycles. Similarly, so with mitomycin C, or if you have an appearance of complication related to the topical therapy, you will need to stop it. Like in this particular patient, where you can see the significant inflammation in the eye following the use of mitomycin, which settled down with the use of topical steroids. There are certain specific situations for topical therapy where we advocate the use of topical therapy. In fact, post-operatively, if there is a residual lesion, you might need to use topical therapy. For xeroderma pigmentosa, we advocate the use of prophylactic interferon, though again at this point in time, as I mentioned, there is a relative paucity as far as the availability of interferon is concerned. And when you're dealing with a patient who has an immunosuppressed state, interferon does not work, and that is somewhere where you will need to resort to mitomycin C or 5-fluorouracil. It's important to know where topical therapy is not indicated, because you cannot afford to waste time. When there's invasion into the ocular coats, intraocular invasion, intraorbital invasion, when you think that the patient is not going to be compliant with the medication, when you are unsure of your diagnosis or doubtful, when it is a rapidly growing lesion, when it is a squamous cell carcinoma, where topical therapy does not have a significant role to play, Patient preference for a lesion that can be given both options. If the patient prefers to undergo surgery, then you cannot really force upon the topical therapy upon the patient. Cost and access to care. And indications for topical therapy are when it is too large, it's always better to chemo reduce the lesion before you undergo surgical therapy. When it's multifocal and you can't go about surgically removing each of those lesions, when there is recurrence after multiple surgeries, and when you're opting for chemo prevention. On the other hand, surgical excision provides you quick resolution. It gives you a diagnostic treatment because you will invariably have histopathology in your hands, and therefore it's considered as the gold standard. However, it will leave behind scarring effects, especially that of cryo-related scarring. You can have residual unrecognized disease, and there is a risk of recurrence of almost up to 7 to 22%, which does exist with topical therapy also. So when you're talking about surgery, just to reiterate the principles, it's always a no-touch technique for OSSN, a margin of 3 to 4 millimeters with alcohol corneal epitheliectomy. A dry field is always preferred. A spontaneous thaw for the double freeze thaw cryotherapy. You don't squirt saline on the freeze ball that forms when you are applying cryo to the edges of the conjunctiva. To the base, if required, the amniotic membrane graft is placed and the specimen is always sent to histopathology. So, since we already saw the surgery in the earlier thing, how do you send the specimen for histopathology? You mark it this way on the glove paper and you send it for histopathology if you have access to the lab in your campus, but otherwise you can just put it into formalin and send it. How to read your report? Well, you basically need to know whether you're dealing with a CIN or a squamous cell carcinoma, whether you're dealing with any aggressive variant which can come back to you with a huge risk of recurrence. If the edge is positive, if the base is positive, you will need to accordingly decide whether you want to go back in and surgically excise or whether you want to continue with topical therapy after the surface completely epithelializes. And these are decisions that are made purely on histopathology. Always remember that any destructive procedure in the form of an enucleation for invasive tumors always requires a tissue diagnosis. I did mention about the role of Allosled in these eyes with giant OSSNs, where it helps the surface to epithelialize faster and reduces the severity of symblepharon, as you can see in this patient, where there was significant improvement in the surface following a very huge lesion that was involving almost the entire cornea and continues to maintain the corneal phenotype over a period of 2 to 3 years despite the extensive lesion. Just a few case illustrations to highlight the points that I touched upon. This is a patient where the lesion, which is a pigmented OSSN, was treated purely with topical chemotherapy using mitomycin C, where you can see the clinical as well as the resolution on the OCT over a period of 2 cycles. This was a patient which also appeared to be a pigmented OSSN, but because of the cyst, we were unsure of the diagnosis and therefore went ahead with a surgical excision instead of chemotherapy. This was a patient which was basically OSSN along with pterygium that also required fornix reconstruction in the second stage. This patient actually was a very interesting patient who had been diagnosed as scleritis and had received intracameral injections for the ARMD through that area of which was actually OSSN. I was very worried and concerned about intravitreal seeding of the OSSN cells. We still have him under follow-up almost 3 years now, following the diagnosis of OSSN, which was established by doing a small incisional biopsy. The lesion healed completely with topical chemotherapy using mitomycin C. This is how he still continues to be free of recurrence. We still cannot see any evidence of intraocular spread, but these are things that one needs to keep in mind when you're treating these patients of OSSN. This was a patient with bilateral keratinization where we were highly suspecting OSSN, but on biopsy it turned out to be a patient of OCP, and the surface significantly improved with the use of immunomodulation. This is a classic case of corneal intraepithelial neoplasia, which also resolved very well with the use of 5-FU. And this is a patient who's completely free of the lesion now. This is to show how extensively you need to document your findings when you're making a note of these patients. A slit lamp photography is probably the best way of doing it along with the documentation. A detailed history taking needs to be taken in these patients to ensure that you're not missing any of the risk factors in these patients. And I think this is a slide that beautifully captures how the management occurs in these patients when you're dealing with just a intraepithelial neoplasia versus a squamous cell carcinoma, which is basically differentiated when there is a breach in the basement membrane of the epithelium, because topical therapy works primarily for intraepithelial neoplasia and surgery is something that works for squamous cell carcinoma. That is why you don't always have a complete resolution with topical therapy alone in certain cases, and you need to subject them to surgical excision once you have chemo reduced these eyes. One important question that you need to answer is what happens if you do not biopsy a suspected OSSN when you're starting these patients on topical therapy. You could miss a diagnosis of a melanotic, of an amelanotic melanoma, or a very aggressive variant of OSSN can be missed. And the possible implications of such a scenario is that you're going to have a setback of almost 2 or 3 months before you actually realize that your lesion is not responding to the topical therapy, and you could have lost precious time. And therefore, it's important that you understand the signs and triage the patient accordingly in these cases, because this is not OSSN. This was a patient of amelanotic melanoma, where you know the implications of a lesion like this, which can be life threatening in these situations. So, to sum up some of the pearls, I think clinical examination, imaging, scientific decision regarding topical versus surgical management is very crucial when you're dealing with these patients. And because Swapna wanted me to have these 10 commandments, I think I've just listed out whatever I tried to highlight through the course of the talk, that the choice of topical agent again can be any, stick to your preference, and if you don't have a response within 6 weeks, then you change to either another topical therapy or move on to surgery as warranted by the clinical situation. And if you want to do a cataract surgery in these patients after resolution of the lesion, ideally speaking, you need to wait for at least a year after complete clinical resolution of the lesion before you do an intraocular procedure. Let me thank my colleague, Dr. Bhaskar Srinivasan, with whom we have embarked on this beautiful journey called as Code Eye Care, Institute of Excellence for Cornea, Ocular Surface and Dry Eye, where we still continue to take care of all the complex corneal and ocular surface conditions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for that excellent talk and the superb videos, as usual. And any questions from the audience?
Yes, sir.
Can you explain a little more about AlloSlept, what it is exactly?
Yes, I think due to paucity of time, I didn't go too much into the detail of that.
That's okay.
When you're dealing with a giant ocular surface neoplasia, which involves more than 6 to 8 clock hours of the limbus, and you have to go ahead with a surgical excision, then you are anticipating that you are going to be causing limbal stem cell deficiency because of your surgery. And therefore, what we do in these situations is that we apply the principles of SLET, simple limbal epithelial transplantation, to the procedure, where we actually do an AlloSLET. We don't take tissue from the other normal eye. We take tissue from the cadaveric donor cornea, the limbal tissue, and we place that on the bare area, whether it be on the corneal side or whether it be over the sclera on the amniotic membrane, which helps the surface to epithelialize faster, because we do not want to leave a very large bare area. It gives us two things. One, it helps the surface to epithelialize faster. Two, it prevents the symblepharon that comes in if you leave a large bare area. We don't want to use an autoslet from the other eye, because in case you need to use mitomycin C post-operatively, then you're compromising the viability of the cells that you've taken from the other eye. And when you're dealing with a tumor in one eye, for any reason, you do not want to touch the other eye surgically at that point in time. Thank you.
I was about to ask you that you have already explained you are taking it from the cadaveric eye. Because I saw you. I counted the number about a dozen to 16 pinch grafts.
Yes, since I have access to the entire 12 clock hours of limbus from a cadaveric donor cornea, there is no limit to the number of pieces that we can put in. You can take in as many bits as you want depending upon the extent of bare area.
So, Geeta, we know that the chances of rejection in an allo slet is slightly more than what you would see in an auto slet. So, the two questions: what is the kind of rejection rate that you have faced in your studies? And secondly, which would you recommend? Simple transplantation or a full arcuate limbal, transplantation from the cadaveric eye?
Yes, Swapna. I think what I would like to clarify here is we still have some amount of functional limbus. So we are not doing it to counter a total limbal stem cell deficiency. We are just doing it so that the rest of the clock hours of limbus can take over a period of time. So we are not really going to be coming across rejection in its true sense, because you do have residual autolimbal stem cells which will help to replenish the surface over a period of time. This is only a stopgap thing that helps us to overcome that immediate post-operative period where you don't want to leave behind a very large bare area. So we really will not be coming across a situation where you're going to have a rejection on the ocular surface related to the allo cells that you're placing on the surface. And it should be bits, not really an allograft, because you're not looking at replenishing the limbus per se, which is anyway there to some extent in these eyes.
Immunosuppression, ma'am?
No, that is the reason why you don't give immunosuppression, because
Okay.
the idea is not to have these cells stay on the surface forever. The idea is only to take their help. It's like a crutch that we use when our leg is fractured, that till the leg can start functioning, you are taking the help of a crutch. So this only serves that help till the rest of the limbal stem cells can actually cover and take over the function.
Do you do it in SJS and other such conditions, or only in malignancies?
So I do have a talk subsequently where in fact I removed the slides on alloslet in cicatricial diseases. It can be done. In fact, alloslet has got several uses in ocular surface diseases, and that will form a separate talk by itself.
Okay.
But this was just to highlight the role of alloslet in OSSN.
Okay. Thank you. We'll wait for that.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Antigenic insult by making only small pinch grafts. Is it?
Yes. In fact, the entire concept of alloslet is because you're placing it on the avascular cornea. You don't really have the kind of rejection that you face with a limbal allograft that you place at the limbus, which is a very vascular structure.
Ma'am, we keep those bits, and over that we keep the amniotic membrane, or like we keep the amniotic membrane and then put these.
So the cells require a scaffold to grow, and the amniotic membrane is always a scaffold wherever it is used. So the amniotic membrane in any situation allows cells to grow over it, and therefore the amniotic membrane is first placed on the bare area and the cells are placed on top of it.
And ma'am, these for alloslet, you're taking it from a cadaveric eye. So like that, we use MK medium, the ones in the MK medium. Is it like that we use?
So you would prefer
that 5 days?
Yes, you would ideally speaking prefer to use within 72 hours of harvesting the eye. Preferably the age should be less than 70, so that the viability of the stem cells is better. But in this situation, when you're using it for OSSN, where like I said, it only acts like a crutch, it's not extremely essential to follow these, which is where we talk about alloslet for epithelialization versus alloslet for visual rehabilitation. There are different indications for alloslet, and here the quality of the tissue does not matter as much, though you do definitely want the cells to be viable. So you would not take something which is very old, but preferably within 4 to 5 days of harvesting the eye.
But anyway, if after 5 days, we should definitely not use it, is it?
Preferably, yes.